Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have Bridgette Shea, and we are talking about her book, The Handbook of Chinese Medicine in Ayurveda. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are.
Okay. So, welcome, Bridgette.
Thank you.
So, there's so much to talk about. I have this whole book highlighted here. And I thought we would take us through the journey. A lot of this is based on, in this book, as I can see, if I can do a summary, it's like looking at the similarities and differences between Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. And it starts, a lot of this book is based on one's constitution. So I thought I'd start there because then I'd like us to navigate to some other parts in the book. So it starts off with different doshas, and I have a picture here. Can you see that on the camera? Let me make sure if I got this. Here, a little bit of echoing in the back with the sound. Okay. All right. So folks can look at this. There's three doshas: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And so tell me about what do these pictures mean and what do these things mean this would be Ayurveda.
Yes. So basically, from an Eastern medicine perspective, which includes Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, human beings are not separate from the rest of the world or from our environment. And just like we have a material body, everything else in nature has a material body. And those material bodies are made up of a combination of elements. So from a Western perspective, we might look at the elements in terms of the periodic table. But from an Eastern medicine perspective, they see the elements as much more fundamental and basic than that, where the things in the periodic table could be broken down into 5 basic groups of elements.
Mm-hmm.
And from an Ayurvedic standpoint, those elements are called space, air, fire, water, and earth.
Okay.
And so everything that is in existence is made up of a combination of these 5 elements.
Space, fire, water, and earth. Okay. And how do they correlate to these three pictures?
And so the way they correlate is that each element pairs with another element and it creates sort of a physiological function in the body. And when space and air are paired with one another and are operating with one another in the body, we call that Vata.
Mm-hmm.
When water and fire are paired and operating with one another in the body as a whole, we call that Pitta. And when earth and water are paired and operate as a whole, as a function in the body, we call that Kapha.
Okay, so every single person is made up of these elements in different combinations of this space, air, water, and fire. And what are these pictures? Because the bodies look pretty dramatic in these pictures. They look different.
Right. So Vata is basically the law of movement in nature. Pitta is basically the law of transformation. And Kapha is the law of sustainability. So you need to have these 3 things in order for something to be alive. And Vata, the movement principle, is characterized in the human physique as, I think the best representation would be like if you think of a runway model or a prima ballerina, that thin, sinewy, graceful, elongated, small boned type of physique is more associated with the Vata dominant physical type. Pittas tend to be more robust and athletic. They look more athletic. They're more muscular, but they're also a little bit more on the lean side. So pittas manifest more like that middle picture. And then kaphas tend to be more big boned. They tend to be shorter in stature and more like sturdy and robust and stable. And so the kapha type looks a little bit more like the one in the third picture.
Okay. And and how does one diagnose? Like I had taken some assessments and I've read through things, and I can read I took a test on, I think it was Deepak Chopra had on the Chopra Institute had one, and I took one a long time ago, and I myself am a combination of Vata and Pitta, and so and it had, like, in the one assessment I took, had three different values, my Vata, Pitta, and Kapha numbers, and it was almost like 60-40, 0, or like almost nearly 0 in the
Right.
Kapha. Um, so I assume that everyone has some combination of these three. Are usually people predominant, or they're dominant in one of the three or two out of the three?
So yeah, so everybody, just like everything in nature is a combination of the five elements, everything is also a combination of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we may say we're Vata predominant or Pitta predominant or Kapha predominant, we still have the other two doshas in our bodies. We
Okay.
couldn't function without them.
Right.
And so when you take one of those quizzes, it basically asks you questions that ask you about various, mostly physical attributes. And then whatever you add up the columns, and then it tells you what the what you are mostly.
Right.
So when you take those quizzes, it's very interesting. They're tricky. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is that it's kind of hard to be honest with yourself. And so it takes a little while. Like, some of them are really easy. Like, do I have dry hair? Well, okay. If you've always had dried hair, you'll say, oh, yes. But if you haven't always had dry hair, you'll be like, well, I didn't used to. So maybe I should say it's not dry, because then that, if I answer it from today, maybe it won't reflect who I truly am.
Right.
That's one thing. And then another thing is that in Ayurvedic medicine, we have two different types of constitutions. We have a Prakruti, which is like our original constitution. That is what some teachers will say the DNA in the body. And then we have the Vikruti, which is where certain genes may have been switched on or off, and where we kind of are today that has sort of strayed or added to our original constitution, or subtracted from what we were originally. And so I often recommend that people take these quizzes first from the perspective of where you are right in this very moment, and then take it again, thinking like as far back as you can into your childhood. Now, this isn't a totally accurate assessment of your Prakruti, but it just gives you a little bit clearer idea of how things can shift over time. So taking it the second time from that perspective of as far back as you can remember as a child, and then you see how things have changed. And in Chinese medicine, this is sort of it's kind of like a root and branch way to look at the constitution. So you have, like in Ayurveda, there's the original constitution, the Prakruti. So that would be more like your root makeup. And then the branch would be like when people come in for Chinese medicine consults or acupuncture, oftentimes they're coming in with complaining about what the branch is, like what the signs and symptoms are of whatever they're experiencing that feels out of balance.
I see. So so let me actually try to merge that with two different things, because I think I misunderstood your first comment. So, for example, like when I was younger, I had dry hair, dry skin. Now that I'm older and I'm going through menopause, my hair and skin is even drier than it was before. But let's say that when I was younger, so like my husband is still sort of like his skin is still very oily, but when he was young, it was more oily, but it could be like I may have had oily skin, but now that I'm going through menopause, I'm having like dry skin, because everything kind of dries when you, as you point out in your book, when you go through menopause. And so pick what you are at this moment, and then also look at what you were before when you were a little kid.
Yeah. So that gives you more of a Prakruti assessment.
Right. And then there's also this at the very bottom, and this is kind of the Chinese look at the Constitution. Tell me a little bit about this.
So as you see all the way to the left, there's that wood type. And from all of these, I would say, looking at this, that wood would look most like Vata.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So wood type. So in terms of the five elements in the Chinese system, which is how these constitutional types are categorized, they're not categorized according to doshas. They're categorized according to the original five elements.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Chinese system, the elements go first from wood. They start with wood.
Mm-hmm.
And wood is about the growing and the pushing forth. It's like the seed sprouting and pushing its way through the soil, around the rocks, and up, bursting out of the ground into the sun. That's wood energy. That crescendo where it bursts out through the ground into the sun and expresses itself is more fire energy. That stability that arises once that thing is established is more earth energy.
Mm.
Once a tree has grown and we're about to go into winter, we have that fall time, and that shedding of what is no longer needed, that's got sort of a bittersweet sense to it. That's like the metal energy.
Mm.
And then the water is like the stillness within us.
Mm.
It's once that whole process has settled and calmed and we come back to who we are in our center, that's more like the water energy.
Okay, so they don't have, you're saying like this one kind of is like if I were to map the Pitta Vata Kosha, they kind of, you can look at these pictures and go, oh yeah, I can see this one is kind of like Vata, these may
Right.
be Pitta,
Yep.
these may be
Yep.
Kapha. Is that right? So that there's
Yep.
somewhat of a map, even though,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay. All right, so I wanted to go through these constitutional types because a lot of the things that you have in your book are about like how to balance. So, for example, in my case, uh, I have menopause, right? So you had mentioned in the book if you actually have menopause, you're more dry. You know, you have those kinds of as a result. I may my normal when I was a kid, I was still probably Pitta Vata, or I think when I've done these constitutional tests, I'm wood, earth, metal, and water, almost with a very little bit of fire, but mostly wood. I was born under the sign of water, and I think metal and earth are part of my constitution too, but I think wood is probably the predominant one for me. And I always
Okay.
get liver chi or liver channel
Yeah.
is the one that whenever I go to acupuncture, they're like liver again. I'm like, okay. So what would that assume? I think it's at wood and I think it's
it,
which ones would it be here?
it would be definitely wood,
Hmm.
a little fire, and a
Hmm.
little metal.
Okay, wait, which makes sense given my constitution. So that's basically whenever I go in there, they're like, oh, your liver chi is out of balance yet again. Okay,
Yeah.
so
And that would be like a pitta imbalance.
okay,
Liver, yeah, liver chi stagnation manifests as many of the traits of a pitta imbalance.
okay,
And pitta types tend to be very driven and ambitious, and they can get frustrated easily, especially if something is an obstacle in their way. They can be sort of self-critical, critical thinkers in general. And then when that activity of the mind gets sort of overemphasized, then that registers as liver chi stagnation. And that is like not feeling like you're going with the flow, but pushing the flow yourself or trying to.
yeah. This all describes my nature, and it seems like it describes almost everyone in the Western United States. I mean, this
Oh,
is
yes.
so. Is that because you had said that there's spleen chi and liver chi stagnation, and those are kind of popular ones. Um,
Yeah.
so what is this harm? So there's this harmony. So you had talked about there's imbalances and disharmony. Help me understand what that means for people who aren't familiar with these. How do both systems talk about imbalance, and what's harmony and what's imbalance, and how does one fix the imbalance?
Okay. So harmony would be like what I just said, like feeling like you can go with the flow. And an example I like to give is one of the primary formulas in the Chinese pharmacopoeia that we use for PMS symptoms, which are characterized by pain and discomfort. Like you can get breast discomfort, you can get bloating, digestive stuff changes around that time. But the main thing is that people tend to experience emotional turbulence during the PMS time. So that's when we give this formula called Free and Easy Wanderer, because that's the intention of what we're trying to do with the body's energy and the mental energy in the person at that time of the month is to smooth and free the flow so that they can feel like they're going with the flow, so that they don't feel like there are obstacles, so that they feel like there can be synchronicities emerging, or like they're in harmony with their surroundings or with nature, or so when they get triggered with things that would normally trigger them, it wouldn't trigger them so much, so they wouldn't be so reactive, but instead would be able to be a little bit more soft with potential triggers and respond instead of react.
Okay,
So
so my original constitution, I'm just going to use myself as an example, and I
sure.
think I'll use my husband, who is actually, I think, more Kapha, and my son and my husband are more Kapha. So I am a Pitta, Vata, let's say predominantly wood. I have this kind of liver chi thing, so maybe a Pitta. I don't know what that means, Pitta imbalance, but what does that mean? So given my constitution, um,
Okay,
what would be the things that you'd say, okay, here's the things I would look for given
gotcha.
Pitta Vata, and wood.
Okay, so one of the first things I would look for is is a sense of if there is any frustration on a regular basis or a feeling of angst. And the second thing I would look for is if there's excessive worry or anxiety.
Okay, so worry, anxiety, frustration.
Now,
Those are triggers for imbalance. Is that right?
right, right. So the worry and the anxiety goes more along with Vata dosha.
Mm,
And the reason that I look for that, even though you might be predominantly Pitta, or even though you might be presenting with or complaining of predominantly Pitta complaints, is that whenever there is an imbalance, Vata is oftentimes involved. And that's because the vitality that flows through the body is sort of under the purvey of Vata dosha. It's governed by Vata. In Chinese medicine, we call it Qi, and in Ayurvedic medicine, we call it Prana. So whenever the prana is disrupted, then there can be a disharmony or an imbalance, and it can happen with any of the doshas or elements. So that's why I would look not just at the pitta in that frustration piece, but also at the vata, and if there's an unsettled feeling, a nervousness, an anxiousness, or an overthinking going
okay.
on.
So the anxiousness, worry, overthinking, that's kind of a Vata thing. So you could be
Yeah.
a Kapha like my husband and still have that worry, anxiety, which means
Oh
that
yeah.
there's a Vata imbalance because there's movement that is, or is that right? Movement that needs to
Right, that's
happen
a
that's not
good way
happening.
to, that's definitely a good way. The thing with Kaphas though is that it's harder to see in them because they have so much, they have so much juice, they have so much stability within their constitution that they're able to conceal those things. Kapha types tend to feel like very comforting to be around. They're like the Rock of Gibraltar, the person you can always like talk to and they listen. And oftentimes that's the way they appear, even though there is something going on behind the scenes where they might be worried about something, for
Okay.
example, and you wouldn't be able to tell unless you knew them really well.
Yeah, that explains my husband perfectly. So he's a Pitta Kapha, and he's very much of a wood, and he has issues. If I were to describe his issues, of the two different imbalances that you talked about. He's not the liver stagnation, he's the spleen. So, can you tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about what that is and how someone with his constitution, we're just using two different constitutions, and I think the
Yeah.
people who are listening who are like, what's mine? You'll have to look at your own, but I'm just showing you how you would use these. So, like my husband, who is um, that constitution, and he has a spleen. What does this mean? Like, what are his, like, if mine is worry, doubt, anxiety, and then anger, I kind of like know that, oh, okay, that's my Vata imbalance, or probably a
And
Vata
Pitta.
imbalance and Pitta imbalance.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
And how
Yeah.
about my husband? What would be his red, his
Well,
signs?
Kaphas can still worry because they have a tendency toward attachment. So there's that sort of fear of losing the attachment to things, or the connection with things. Kapha is a combination of earth and water. So that said, water has a cohesiveness. Water molecules attract to one another. So that's a very fundamental structure of the Kapha constitution and quality of it. And so, in addition to potentially being more on the side of someone who would worry, they can also be more prone to like sadness or melancholy, have more heaviness. They've got earth in their constitution.
Mm.
So earth is the most dense of all the elements, and it can create this heaviness. And so that can manifest in their emotional the way that they're manifesting their emotions. Um, does that answer your question?
Yes, I think what I'm so for me I get sad, like for me I get anger. For my husband it may be sadness. Like
Right.
with his constitution, sadness is kind of like, oh, that's my heads up that there I have an imbalance. For me it's
Right.
anger, and for both of us it's worry, doubt, anxiety. Because that's like the Vata. Okay, so
Yeah.
who are we missing that in this description? That what are some other triggers? So sadness, anger. What are some other emotional triggers that we know that we're out of balance aside from the ones we've mentioned, or does that kind of hit the gamut?
I think that hits a lot, but in Chinese medicine, there are five predominant emotional types, and they are categorized. They're called the Shen, or the spirits.
Mhm.
So they're sort of the different parts of our consciousness, and they're anchored into the body, into specific organs. So sadness would be anchored into the lungs, and it's
Mm.
associated with the grieving process and the metabolism of grief in the body. And then the liver is associated with anger and with being able to metabolize anger. The spleen is associated with worry or with overthinking or just over over mentalizing. And the spleen is then there, it's responsible for transforming and processing and digesting not just the food and fluids we consume, but our emotional
Ah.
our in and the information we're taking in. um, the kidneys are, they house the spirit that is associated with fear. So they're responsible
Mm.
for processing fear and are injured by fear. And the heart is responsible for keeping a balance of joy in one's existence.
Right, so those are the different shens you said that actually, so they're different kind of, if I'm feeling very sad, it could be, it's, I have an issue maybe with joy, but then what is it? Is it from over emotional spleen kind of issue, or is it, so I didn't understand. So like, let's
Well,
say for joy.
the spleen is more associated with worry, and the spirit of the spleen is called the yi.
Hmm.
And I also sort of look at the spleen yi as our guilting ourselves.
Okay. I
I
have.
feel like guilt it's not just worry, but guilt.
Ah, okay. Well, that's one of my
Self-conscious.
favorite emotions. Okay. So when we have these emotions and or constitutions, it lets us being predisposed to certain types of emotional patterns, certain organ issues. And so now that I know my constitution, I know that anger is my heads up. My husband maybe sadness is his heads up. Um, I know now when I have an imbalance in these things, right? And there's other types of imbalances. There's yin imbalance, yang imbalance. Um, where does that factor into all these things?
Like the yin and the yang.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean? Yeah. So the yin is in the physical body, it's all of the fluids, the synovial fluid, the interstitial fluid, it's all the fluids, it's the structure. The yang is the energetic principle in the body. It's our ability to feel awake and alive and animated, and it's the warmth in the body. It's what is behind the metabolism. It's the energy that fuels any chemical reactions is the yang. For anything to be expressed or to transform, you need yang energy. But you also need the yin because that's what's being transformed.
Ah,
That's the
okay.
substrate for which the yang can exist from.
Yeah, and those are reasons. Those all correlate to different, like how moist, how dry, how hot, how cold. All those things kind of correlate, as I understand from your book. So yin would be wet and cold, is it? And yang would be hot and hot and dry. So these are
Yeah.
the kinds of two, like, so when I think of myself, I more tend towards, I'm cold a lot, but then my skin is dry, my hair is dry, everything is dry. So I'm kind of a mix of the two, I guess.
Yeah, that's yin and it's also vata. That's being more vata.
Ah, okay, got it. So those are these things combine in different permutations, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to make a straight line between these things.
Oh, it definitely is.
Okay, so now that we've gotten these terms correct, you talk. I thought that this is so. Now that let's say that someone reads your book, they get a sense of where they are, and the numbers. Just because there was a question that was asked before, so we talked in the very beginning about taking some type of assessment. I ended up taking a Chopra one, in which it gave like different numbers on the percentage of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. But that's what I meant by numbers for folks that answer. But let's say that you figure out what your constitution is in either of these two systems. And then when you're out of balance based on these things. So you kind of have your red flag. So like, oops, I'm out of balance. Now it's like live your day and how you can like how you can either prevent being out of balance or be conscious of um, where what's happening during your day or season of the life. And I thought, since I had never offered content like that, I'd cover this, which is you have this incredible chart that shows the different times during the day, starting from, first thing in the morning, 7 a.m., 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way into the evening. And each of these time periods actually have different, in this case, so for example, let's see, it looks like from 6 to 10 is Kapha time, 10 to 2 is Pitta time, and 2 to 6 is Vata time. What the heck does this mean? Like, should I have a
Okay.
party at 2 to 6? What does this mean?
So basically, for all of us, regardless of constitutional type, it's recommended to wake up and get out of bed before 6 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah, because kapha, like we talked about, has more of the stable structure in the body, but it also has a heaviness to it that the other constitutional types don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So that heaviness starts to predominate in the environments beginning at 6 in the morning. So if you get up between 6 and 10, then you'll have less vitality than if you get up before 6, because that heaviness component will have already set in.
Oh,
And so it's like you want to keep hitting the snooze.
we're all screwed. I mean, who wakes up before 6?
The Dalai Lama.
Okay. Okay, we've all failed on that one, I think, but I don't know. I don't know very many people who wake up earlier than
It's
6.
also the best time to exercise because we're more robust between 6 and 10.
Okay.
It's interesting. There's the two halves of the day are separated, so that from about 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. is the time of greatest activity.
Mm-hmm.
And then from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m., we're supposed to be more winding down. And so the body can take its resources and use them to detoxify and heal us. So these time charts go along with that observation from the ancients, that those are the two things that happen throughout the 24-hour time cycle, that from about 3 a.m. to 3 p.m., we're more in a building mode,
Yeah.
and then from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. we're more in a detox mode.
Yeah, and I don't know whether some people I would say the vast majority of creative people that I know function this way. They'll often say, the first thing I do in the morning is write, because that's like get up, I'm fresh, the kind of creative, generative kinds of things. But then I'll have some people, and they're in the minority, but that like from 3 p. At 11 o'clock when everyone's asleep is when I have my kind of big push
Right.
creatively, or I paint, or I do all these different things.
Right.
And so, I want to go. So let me continue. So does that mean that there's certain people that live outside of these norms, based on their constitution? How would these constitutions be affecting this particular way, this daily routine?
Well, if you're Kapha, you don't want to get up at 6 in the morning.
Right.
So Kaphas are about sustainability, and they like sustainability. Vatas are about movement. They love movement. And Pittas are about transformation, and they love transformation. So they're going to be drawn to whatever those things are, and they're going to be drawn to sort of increasing that energy in their mind and body just naturally according to the time clock. So when you said somebody may feel that they are most creative or they do their best work at 11 o'clock at night, that's usually because if they haven't gone to bed by 10, the Pitta time kicks back in, and it makes it difficult to fall back asleep or to fall asleep and rest. You get kind of a second wind around 10 p.m. if you're not already asleep.
Interesting. That does explain a lot for me. Okay, so it kind of depends on when I look at the 6 to 10 is like Kapha time. So like try to get up before 6, and during a 6 to 10 p.m. that's kind of like a time that you said that you want to work out because you're
the AM one. Kapha in the AM.
Okay, no, 6 a.m. in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, wait, maybe I'm looking. This is 6 a.m. Okay, 6 a.m. in the morning right here is when I'd be wanting to work out. 6 to, let's say, this looks like, I see, 6 to 10 is when I would want to be working out. And then from 10 to 2, it's Pitta time. So what does that mean for my day?
That means that that's the best time to have your biggest meal of the day. So the ancients recognized that the Agni, or the spleen chi, or the digestive fire in the body, which is made up of a combination of the microbiome, the gut microbiome, the acid in the stomach, the bile, the enzymes, everything we need to digest and assimilate properly and evacuate properly, is the strongest between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Interesting.
And so that's also when the sun is the strongest during the day. And Agni means it's like light and heat and shining. And so when the sun is the strongest, also our Agni is the strongest, as above, so below.
Hmm.
That's the idea with that time clock and that time of day. So that's the best time to have your biggest meal, as opposed to having it for dinner, which culturally is what we tend to do.
Okay, and these time periods from 6 to 10, 10 to 2, and then we'll talk about 2 to 6. This is for everyone, right? Like this is kind
Yeah.
of okay. All
Yeah.
right, so what happens from 2 to 6?
So from 2 to 6, that's more, that's a nice time for creativity.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. 2
And
p.m. to 6 a.m. is time for creativity. Wow.
well, if you're going according to the way people lived hundreds of years ago, you're going to be waking up around the crack of dawn or before it.
Mm.
And so that's when, like in monasteries, that's when they get up and they meditate, or um, like Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, she advocates doing morning pages
Hmm.
as soon as you get up in the morning, and just kind of getting the gunk out from the night and the day before, so that you can be more creative and clear. So it's a time to sort of like circulate your prana,
Hmm.
circulate your chi, tap into your chi and your prana, your vitality. And creativity is a great way to free any blockages in the flow of the chi and the prana.
Interesting. Okay, so that's basically the Vedic model. And someone had asked, where do we get the numbers from? And I don't know which number. So there's two different things. There's the constitutional type that we talked about originally, and then there's this in Bridget's book, Chinese Medicine and Ayurveda. This is a chart that's underneath here that's talking about the times. Since they don't necessarily see the picture, you can actually look at the chart on my YouTube channel and you'll be able to see the chart. Okay, so here's some other numbers on here, and I'll just describe it for folks who are listening. This is another circle, and within that circle are the Chinese five elements: fire, water, um, fire, wood, metal, earth. So this also is, it's like a little time, it's a little clock with different elements that are operating at each time. I assume that this is very similar, right, to the other one. I don't know if I were in the Chinese medicine I concept at time of day, what would I learn from this chart?
So this chart is telling you, this is a meridian chart.
Okay.
So say you're looking at, let's take 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. liver
Okay.
time,
Okay.
because so many people wake up in the middle of the night between 1 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So liver time is the time that there's the greatest amount of energy moving through the liver channel
Mm-hmm.
and to the liver organ. The liver is the most active between 1 and 3 a.m. And if the liver has to be more active than it would like to be, then then we wake up, because it's like the liver is sort of overwhelmed or over,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't let us settle. We say the going back to the spirits, the hun, or the spirit that is tied into the liver, anchored into the liver organ. It is what helps us dream at night, but also sleep deeply. And if that is unsettled for any reason, because the liver is unsettled, then that will cause us to wake up at that time of day.
Mm.
So this clock is showing that the channel associated with that structure in the body is most active at that time.
And what other types of things on this? So there's like, so if people were to look at the book, there's like 1 to 3 a.m. is liver time, 3 to 5 is lung time, 5 to 7 a.m. is large intestine, 7 a.m. to 9 is stomach, 9 to 11 is spleen, 11 to 1 is heart, 1 to 3 is small intestine, 3 to 5 is urinary bladder, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. is kidney, and 7 to 9 p.m. is pericardium, 9 to 11 is triple burner, and 11 to 1 is gallbladder. So that's
Right.
basically what this chart shows. If I know people can't see when they're listening
Yeah.
on in the radio, but this is a chart that we're looking at. So how do I use this? I'm a Pitta Vata. I'm a firewood metal person.
Okay.
What do I
So
do with this?
so I would say the best way to use it is to first notice if there are any patterns in your daily routine or schedule that you notice. Like, do you get an ache or a pain at a certain time, or do you feel bloated or gassy at a certain time, or like I just mentioned with the liver time, do you wake up at a certain time? Because those things can give you an indication as to which channel might be having a hard time
Ah,
throughout the day, right? And
right,
then, like, for 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., we know that the energy of the large intestine is the greatest then, because that's when it's large intestine time.
right,
And so 5 to 7 a.m. is the ideal time to have a bowel movement,
right,
because the chi or the yang or the prana in the large intestine is strongest then, and it can really push things out at that time.
right.
Um, we can see that the fire time lands in the late morning and early afternoon during the day, which is also the time that we talked about for the digestive fire to be the strongest. So the Agni in the body that digests the food is associated with the fire element largely. And
Mhm,
so that is the best time. We know our fire is the strongest then. We want to feed the fire at
mhm,
that time
mhm,
when it is the most active, when it is the most able to consume.
mhm,
Because when we do that at other times during the day, like in the water time, even between 5 and 7, that's when like the microbiome in the gut, the spleen cheese is waning at that time. And
mm.
so when we put food in at that time, it makes it so that we might not be digesting it and assimilating it as well as we could be.
I see. Okay, so this has times it has some repercussions for my overall lifestyle, and then also what I'm experiencing throughout the evening. Like if I'm going to use the restroom from 1 to 3 a.m., probably have a liver issue. Um, and then um, what? How does my constitution affect this particular chart, or does it, or is this just a general way of
That's
living?
general.
Okay,
That's general. Yep.
okay. Okay. And in the last 7 minutes, you also have this, which I thought was fascinating. This is also a cleansing and season chart. So this is yet another chart.
Yeah.
This is a Vata, and if for folks who can't see it, make sure to go to my YouTube channel and you'll be able to see the pictures. But it talks about, the 4 seasons: early summer, late summer, autumn, early winter, late winter, and spring. And it talks about those being correspondent to different dosha types, the Kapha Pitta, um, uh, Vata. So, what does one make out of this beautiful chart here?
Okay, so this is sort of a pictorial representation of what was written about in the book. So what's in the book actually explains what this says.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if we're looking at this chart, we'll see that right now we're between the winter solstice and the summer solstice.
Mm-hmm.
And that time is dominated by Kapha dosha.
Okay.
And so right now in this chart, Kapha is accumulating. And
Mm.
in our bodies, Kapha is accumulating. So that's nice. What does that mean? What that means is that in the spring, the body starts to secrete more mucus. And it's a really good time to do a cleanse because the body is naturally trying to push out whatever gunk accumulated in the body through the fall and the winter.
Mm.
And when it does that, we become more mucousy, and then we also become a little bit more inflamed and more prone to like allergies and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can use the mucus secretion to our benefit because we can do things that help our bodies detoxify while it's already detoxifying.
Ah, okay. So when I look at this kapha, this is the best time, is the spring to early, sorry, late
Yeah,
winter. It's this, I guess right now, which is March to May, is spring. Is that the best
right.
time? It's like this, if you do a cleanse, go ahead and do it. This is probably the best time, March to May. Because
Yeah,
let's say I did it in November and January. I'm like, oh, I need a cleanse because I've been eating all these cookies and chocolates from, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Is that not a
right.
good time? And if so, why not?
It's it's not the best time because our bodies are naturally designed to hold on. And
Ah,
So that's why, we tend to crave things that are going to like put on weight or whatever, because we are designed to digest heavier things in the wintertime, because that's naturally what's available from the earth at that time, are heavy, like nuts and seeds and meats that have been preserved and things like that. So it's not until the spring where we are getting into that detox time and things start to grow again that we have more, vegetables and fruits. So that's why it's not ideal to do it in the winter, because the body's just holding on anyway. And the other thing is if you're doing a cleanse, and a lot of people will be doing a fast instead of a cleanse.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not eating when your Agni is burning really deeply in the body in the wintertime, then your Agni can start to consume your own fluids. And so it's actually very depleting, and it can make you feel really cold and weak. And there are a lot of things
Like
that
don't fast during the winter time, because like already it's like you're trying to build stores to build fire. So going over and depleting yourself of food or drink or whatever, not a good time. Don't fast during the winter. Don't cleanse during the winter. Cleanse during the springtime. And how about the summer? What does that mean about the summer and fall? Are there certain things that we should be like,
So I also lead fall cleanses, because fall is, I think, the second best time to cleanse during the year. There's the energy of change is very strong at that time, and so it helps to facilitate that, just kind of letting go of bad habits that we've accumulated over summertime. Oftentimes we talk about the holidays and the bad things that we ate, but really if we look at summertime, we tend to sleep in later, we tend to go to bed later, we tend to consume more alcohol and more iced drinks and foods and barbecue and all of these heavy things that sort of dull or dampen the Agni, or the digestive fire. And we're doing it at a time of year where the digestive fire actually isn't as strong. So we're supposed to be eating like lighter, easier to digest things. In the summer, we do the exact opposite.
I see. So if you look at this chart that you have in your book, it's Vata time, which is like light broth soups, popsicles, like not like big, ribs, big margarita, frozen margaritas.
Exactly.
Do that in the winter time.
Yeah, save that for winter.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because I know that at least if I follow my natural instinct, I want to eat salads during summer. And when I eat salads in the winter, somehow I resent it. My body doesn't like it. But if I have stews and soups and like those kinds of things, like my body seems happier because it's warmer.
Yeah.
It's, kind of cozy food, comfort food, those kind of things. This book is such a beautiful resource. There's so much information, and I can't even imagine all the education you've had to actually create this book. Thank you so much. I know we just did like a quick, I was trying to figure out one way to kind of go through the whole entire book in a short period of time, to give people just an appetizer version of all the wonderful things in this book. Thank you, Bridgette. We've been talking to Bridgette Shea, her book, The Handbook of Chinese Medicine and Ayurveda. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show, and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.